Hi there, I'm Katie Wagner from Utah State University Extension in Salt Lake County. Let's go take a look at your garden. Okay, we're here in a busy urban area in Salt Lake County, and I wanted to show this great example of sunscald injury or southwest injury in trees. And you can see this damaged portion here all the way down to the dead tissue underneath, facing the southwest exposure. And what happens with this injury is that during the winter time, when the sun is shining and there may be snow on the ground, and so there's white light reflecting onto the trunk of the tree, this area heats up. And when it heats up, the cells become activated. They're thinking it's springtime, it's time to grow. And then at nighttime, when the weather cools back down and the temperatures go to freezing, those cells are killed. Over time, this injury can cause severe cracking and damage of the tree. And we can see that all the way from the bottom of the tree, all the way up into the canopy, this severe cracking. This will eventually kill this tree. So this is something that we definitely want to try to prevent against in our landscape trees. So this young mountain ash is especially susceptible to sunscald or southwest injury. It is a young tree. Most young trees and shrubs have very thin bark, and this thin bark is more prone to cracking than an older, more mature tree that has a thicker, more developed bark. So it's very important that we protect this tree from sunscald injury. And the way that we're going to do this today is by wrapping it with a white tree wrap. You do want to use a white material. White reflects the sun away from the trunk of the tree, and what that does is it keeps the trunk physically cooler. So you remember before, if the sun were to hit this tree trunk and it were to heat up the cells just within the bark and activate those cells, that those cells at that point in time would be prone to being killed when the temperatures drop back down to freezing, and that's when we see our cracking. And so we want to make sure that we protect this tree by wrapping this tree. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the base here. Tie my wrap down. By the way, this wrap can be purchased at most home and garden stores. And I just want to do a pattern like this, especially making sure that this southwest facing exposure is protected. I can overlap, that's fine. This wrap goes on towards late fall, early winter, when the threat of freezing temperatures is present, and it needs to come off early springtime after the threat of freezing temperatures is passed. Don't want to leave this wrap on all year. If you do that, you present an avenue in which pest and disease can get inside the trunk of the tree and can cause harm to the trunk of your tree. Okay, so I'm done wrapping the way up this tree. I did wrap a little further up this tree than some of the other trees. The main point is you want to try to get as much of the trunk area protected as possible. You could wrap some of these limbs as well if you chose to, but I wanted to make sure, since I had so much of this exposed trunk, that I got wrapping on the majority of it. Typically people wrap up to where you start to get the start of the majority of your limbs. If you have several branches in the same tree or shrub, don't be afraid to just wrap around all of those branches in this type of a form to get the same protection that you would for a trunk of a tree. One reason for having a mulch layer to protect trees is to avoid an injury like this. And this was most likely caused by a lawnmower or a weed whacker running into the trunk of this tree. You can see this is a fairly severe injury to this tulip tree here. So a layer of mulch helps to keep the lawnmowers and the weed whackers away from this trunk area. Also, mulch is really wonderful because it is a layer, a protective layer in which the tree does not have to compete with grass to gain access. So it really provides a year-round reservoir of water for this tree. Also, in the winter time, the layer of mulch acts as almost like an insulating blanket. It really helps to moderate or stabilize that surface temperature of the soil. So all of those reasons really make mulch a great solution for protecting your trees and shrubs in the landscape. The mulch layer should ideally be somewhere in the range of about 2 to 3 inches thick. It doesn't have to be very thick. And it's really wonderful if you can bring that mulch layer all the way out to what we call the drip line of the tree. We have this really beautiful northern catalpa here. And the drip line actually follows where the leaves end all the way around the tree. So this large circle around the tree. And as water drips down onto the ground, this is where the majority of the feeder roots are for the tree that bring up water and nutrients that help supply this tree. So here we have a very good mulching job where we've got about 2 to 3 inches of mulch. It's brought all the way out to the drip line of the tree. But there's one other thing that I really want to show you that's very important when you mulch a tree or a shrub in the landscape. And that is that you want to make sure that you pull that mulch away from the base of the tree. This tree is mulched correctly because, as you can see, the trunk of the tree comes down, and at this very base here, we see that the roots are starting to flare out into the ground. That means that this tree was planted correctly because it was planted right at that root flare. You see that on older mature trees with the trunk that comes down and then they flare at the ground. And then also when we put down our mulch, we want to make sure that we don't have the mulch covering that root flare. We leave that open. Okay, here's another tree, and I hope you can take just a second to look at this mulching job and to see the problem with it based on what we learned from the previous example. And many of you may notice that the mulch is much, much too high on this tree. The tree almost looks like a popsicle stick coming out of the ground. You don't see any flaring right at the bottom. And in fact, we have almost what we call a volcano shape to the mulch. This mulch is resting too high on this trunk. So if I wanted to correct this situation, I'd go ahead and I'd pull this mulch back. You can see I'm really pulling away quite far. We want to keep digging. See how deep that was buried? It's hard to notice that until you really get in here and you dig down and you look for that root flare. You can see how deeply that was buried, the root flare was buried, and that's very difficult for the tree. So whenever you're doing your mulching job, you want to make sure that you always find that root flare and that the mulch comes away. If you were to leave the mulch up against the trunk of the tree like this would present an avenue for pests and disease to get into the tree, and it could eventually act as a detrimental effect to the health of the tree. So it's very important when you are mulching that you do it correctly. Another really important thing to help protect your trees and shrubs during the winter time is to make sure that they're well watered in before the dormant season hits. And I wanted to just show here a really easy and inexpensive way to water a tree. This is an inexpensive soaker hose. You can buy these at most yard and garden stores for somewhere in the range of about $15. And I can hook this up to my garden hose and just barely turn it on to a trickle. And this will give this tree a nice slow water. I want to leave that running for a long period of time. You can leave it for a couple hours. It's not a waste of water at that point because you're barely turning on the water to a trickle. It's just that it's giving this tree a really nice deep water. Again, I'm putting the soaker hose down around the drip line of the tree, and with that water combined with this wonderful layer of mulch here, it's really going to give this tree a good water before the dormant season hits and the ground freezes. Okay, we can rest easy that now our trees and shrubs are taken care of for the wintertime months. In summary, we have the nice layer of mulch that's been placed at the base of the tree. You can see that the root flare is exposed and the mulch is gradually sloping out to the drip line of the tree. We have our trunks wrapped in the white to help prevent against sunscald and southwest injury. And we've used the soaker hose to give this tree a nice water in before the ground freezes for the winter season. It's important to note that this isn't the best time of year to fertilize your trees and shrubs. Go ahead and leave that for early spring. And it's also not the best time of year to do any significant pruning. Any limbs that are diseased or broken can be pruned off at any time of the year, but this isn't the time of year to be doing pruning on your trees and shrubs. For more gardening tips, please visit our website.